Well, it is our privilege to have Dr. Asa Ahimbisibwe on our show today. I hope I said your name okay. I've practiced it a few times. But, Doctor, you are.
Yes, you did.
Oh, good. That's great. Well, you are an obstetrician and a gynecologist and author of 2 books. And we're going to chat about your newest book, Radical Love. But before we get to that, I just want to hear a little of your story. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you came to follow Jesus.
Well, Lorie, thank you so much for having me on the show. I was born in Uganda, which is one of the countries that make up the East African region. My childhood was happy, very busy, and exciting. At the same time, it was very challenging. Growing up, I did not know that we lacked anything or needed anything. So from time to time, my mother would send me along to a friend in the neighborhood to borrow some clothes if we needed to go out, have a visit, or visit the relatives. It was until I joined primary school, which is elementary school, that I realized that we did lack the most of the basics, such as, pens and pencils and school uniform and clothes. So my parents did not know how to read or write their names, but they wanted to give me an education. So around grade 3, they could no longer afford the school fees. So they shipped me over to one of our relatives, and this person helped me to go through grade school.
Wow.
I tell you this story just as a background of how far the faith and in Christ has brought me. And it was during this time when I stayed with one of our distant relatives that I met his father, who was an elderly gentleman who had become a Christian during the 1930 revival that swept across the whole region of East Africa. And through him, I began to learn how to actually trust in God and become a Christian that was quite practical. One of the few verses that he taught me was Jeremiah 29:11, where the Bible tells us that I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, to give you a future and a hope. And it was from this time on that my faith became stronger and shaped the trajectory of my life. And one of the things that I wanted to let my viewers know was, for instance, living practical Christianity. Even as a child struggling to get school fees, I would go out on the street and sell, roasted ground nuts, bananas, and pancakes, which I made from small bananas. And then I would go to people and knock on their doors every day. They would chase me, I would come back. They would chase me, I would come back. And that was from the story of this persistent servant who could not give up. And so I would go again until they would say, you know what, we'll buy some groundnuts from you so that you don't have to come back. So it was this faith in Lord that has shaped the trajectory of my life, but also has informed the passions and my career.
Well, what a wonderful, inspiring story. I mean, the lesson of perseverance. I mean, I just really appreciate how you not only came to the Lord, but you've taken this message of the gospel into your everyday life. Like you say, practical Christianity. You're a doctor, you've written books, and your main message is that we need to show radical love to people. And that's the title of your book. I love the title. And the storyline is simply a story of a teenage girl who got pregnant, but she, instead of going to her parents, she decides it would be better to commit suicide. What a tragic thought. Why did you write this book?
Indeed, Lorie, in 1 John chapter 4, the Bible starts by telling us that God is love. And some of us who love, we are of God. And he who claims to love and he who does not love has not seen God. In the same chapter, it actually indeed goes ahead to say that perfect love drives out all fear, because fear really speaks to punishment. And he that fears has actually not been perfected by love. So one of the days I walked into a hospital and met this 14-year-old girl was seated on a bench. She was crying, obviously distraught. And I sat down next to her and asked her what was she doing and what was wrong. She told me she was waiting to have a medical abortion. And I asked her, where were the friends? Where were the parents? Was any other person aware she was going through such a terrible time? She told me, no. And what was shocking, Lorie, she told me that for all she knew, it could possibly be a higher chance that her parents were outside at the picket lines, demonstrating and protesting um, medical abortion.
Wow.
And I began to wonder, how is it possible that a child who knows that they are loved so much, especially by their parents, would be in such a terrible situation, a very critical situation, a dangerous time of their lives without the support of the people who love them so much and the people they love most.
Yeah.
And then I began to decide to write this story and tied up most of the other stories, which are from my patients that I see every day, just so that we can have this conversation going of what does it really mean for us to love our children.
Well, thank you for writing this story. And I think it is such a good reminder, as you've demonstrated, we can show radical love, simple compassion to people right in front of us each day. And you've really championed for girls and women and providing healthcare and education. And part of your proceeds of the book goes to that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're doing that? What is the work that you're involved in then?
So this is really also born from my faith and what I believe. When Jesus was teaching, he said that who much is given, much is expected. And for me, I know how it means to lack. I know what it means to be wanting to have an education, but you cannot afford it. I know what it means, to live at the margins of society for some time. But also, I'm acutely aware of the blessings and the privilege that I've been able to have through the mercies of God, His love. I've been able to have an education that has challenged and changed the trajectory of my life. So if I'm able to at least change one person's life, that to me is my ministry. And so my wife and I, even when we were still in Uganda, decided that we would send, one girl at a time to school. And when that one finishes school, then we would get another person to go to school. And then we would do that from our mega incomes. And I decided that if I did write these books, part of the proceeds will still go to this thing, the ministry that I feel so passionate about, to be able to change someone's life. I may not be able to change the whole world, but changing the world of one person at a time is something that we can do.
Well, I think that's the main message of your books, isn't it? And it's also the main message of your life as a doctor. You change someone's life one conversation at a time. What can you say to our viewers today that might help us each live with this same kind of purpose of showing radical love?
Well, God determines the places and the times where we should live and what we should do with our lives. So every day we need to ask ourselves, are we living in a way that reflects the qualities of our God in heaven? If people meet us, even just for a minute, do they go out knowing that they have been loved, they have been cared for, they have been treated with compassion and kindness and dignity? Or do they just go out, being so drawn away from the God that we profess? So if we can just treat each person with kindness and dignity, then we'll be able to express the love of God for every person.
I totally agree. And it can be just paying attention, can't it? Wherever we work, wherever we serve. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing this great message. If you want to find the book Radical Love, go to 700club.ca. We're going to have all the information there for you. Thank you, Doctor. We really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, Lorie.